couple weeks ago, I filmed a video all about const versus let because, well, it's an interesting topic to me, and I have a stance, which is that both are fine. I tend to use const when I can. There's a phenomenal blog post by Jamie Builds Ghost, Jamie Kyle, whatever you want to call him, from a couple years ago. It's actually quite a bit longer than that I've used as a reference for a while, and that's what I used in the video. It's not that const means something, it's that let means something. And when you're using let, it should be with some type of intent, and it should communicate something to your team. Right before I put out that video, I went to Epic Web Conf. I did not expect for Ryan Florence to be there, much less to give a talk, much less for that talk to be const versus let, which immediately sparked the debate up once again. I could have published the video I already recorded, but so much has happened since, and we've had so much discourse and even people I did not expect, like Lee Rob, moving over to the let side of camp, that I felt we needed to re-record and make a new video all about const versus let. But if you are interested in that other video, I'll have the whole thing up on the Theo Throwaways channel. If you don't know about that, it's all the videos I don't really know how to make a thumbnail or title for or don't think fit here. Check it out. Anyways, let's get into this wonderful debate of const versus let, and maybe even bring up some var. As I said, this Ryan Florence talk was what started the debate again, so it only is fair if I dive in.
Hi.
That's an interesting opening slide, oh boy.
Has my 5 minutes started? I'm just getting trolled. All right, my name's Ryan, and I'm not going to talk about Remix. We're going to talk about dynamite real quick. Dynamite was created for mining, but what do people use it for? To kill other people in wars. Much to the chagrin of this man, Nobel, that's his last name.
Very interesting analogy. I'm sure this isn't going to be used for a reach of any form.
You've probably heard of the Nobel Prize, specifically the Nobel Peace Prize. So he was probably pretty upset that his invention was not used for the thing he wanted it to be used for. Anyone good at chemistry know what this is? Water. That's LSD. For some people, it might be water. This is the guy.
Take enough LSD and I'm sure that looks like water.
Guy who invented it. There's no like prize named after him, so I can't remember his name. It's like Albert or something like that. Hoffman. Okay, we got LSD fans here.
I love the chatter who immediately knew who it was.
I don't even drink coffee, so like this is as far away from anything that I'm putting in my body. So he was trying to create a compound to treat ADHD, a central nervous system stimulant or something like that is what it was. And he was trying to like treat ADHD and like hyperventilation from like panic attacks. So he's trying to help people, right? And I don't know, I guess maybe some people microdose LSD and they say it helps them. But it's pretty undisputed that LSD has wrecked many.
This is supposed to be a 5-minute thing, and we're almost a minute in, and he's talked so far about dynamite and LSD.
Many lives. So I don't mean to say that too jokingly, but this is kind of a fun talk. And he invented LSD and it got used for things he didn't intend. Reading his Wikipedia page, he continued to take LSD his whole life, and kept trying to find a different use for it, and never did. This is a guy who invented Q-tips.
I'm one of the few people who uses Q-tips for a lot of other things like computer cleaning and shit. They're very useful, but fair. I'm excited to see how this ends up in const versus let. 'Cause right now I feel like I baited my audience. This isn't even my talk.
It's like, it's for cleaning your ear, yes, but not that part. It just makes it worse when you just keep like shoving the thing into your ear, right? So like, and they got it all over the morning, but like, has anyone used a Q-tip for anything?
This is why we don't agree, Ryan, because I'm always the person who actually uses the thing in this intended way. But yes, I use Q-tips in a lot of intended ways, cleaning all sorts of shit. Really nice.
Besides trying to get earwax out. No, it's the only thing we do with it. Here's another guy who created something. Dave Herman. Some of you who are old hats like me remember him. 10 years ago, ES6 was all the rage. JavaScript it was like JavaScript puberty. It was like coming of age, and it could actually
the good HTML5 ES6 wave, good times.
Like do cool things now, and we're taking it very serious. React hit the scene, and we're building really interesting websites. And so the language needed to get a little bit better. And Dave Herman was someone who was really instrumental in pushing the language forward. And he's a hero of mine. He's one of my web heroes. Some other people obviously were involved too, but Dave was talking a lot about ES6 and some of its features. And here is one of his talks, little screenshot. Notice that it says let is the new var.
Yeah, it says that because var isn't replaced by const. Var, in its intended use cases, has been replaced with let because it's a variable. It's meant to change. Let is letting it change. Oh boy.
What's missing from his slide? Const is missing. You can go and search all of his ES6 talks and slides and comments. Doesn't talk about const. So I wonder what he has to say about it. The guy who gave us let and const. I wonder if he's like the guy who gave us dynamite and LSD and Q-tips. Or maybe he loved it. So Pamela Fox, another web hero of mine, I'm this close to holding a company meeting about when we should use let versus const. Anyone had that meeting in your...
Is this kind of that meeting? God, are you playing this video in that meeting? Oh no, I am so sorry. Either way.
No, we don't even do that anymore, right? We just use const. Dave Herman, I'm sorry. Why cats? Yehuda cats.
I didn't actually know this. That Dave Herman regretted const. Oh boy, this is going to be interesting.
Warned me const was a mistake for this exact reason, and I didn't take it seriously enough. One of my main ES6 regrets. The guy who gave you const regrets giving you const. Does he just feel bad, or like, did this ruin him? PSA, const is short for constant, not functional programming.
This is a personal attack. I'm offended. I see how it is.
Y'all think you're a bunch of immutability. I use const. I'm going to learn OCaml one day.
I do intend to learn OCaml one day, but that has nothing to do with what we're talking about here, Ryan. I understand const is not proper immutability, and I understand wanting to learn OCaml kind of makes me a tool. These are two separate, unrelated things.
JS const should never be used for anything but constants. Using const to mean the variable happens to not be reassigned makes your code less readable, not more. You can...
This is another one of those remove the art from the artist moments, isn't it? We're not going to agree, are we, Dave? I am so sad. The list grows one longer.
Clap, John. Let's just do one clap, though, because that's how it feels being a fan of let. It's like it's you and everybody else. I'm going to do a second edition of Effective JavaScript just to shoot post about const and print and incite flame wars in the Amazon reviews.
Thanks for keeping it PG, Ryan.
I might be a jerk, but I don't swear. I got the important things down.
Didn't know that Ryan didn't swear. Makes sense.
Sorry for the const tweets, folks. I'm feeling much better now. We actually, we ruined this, man. This tweet has nothing to do with my talk, but look at the timestamp.
When you're sleep deprived to keep trying to stay awake in the night, you might think you can accomplish the things, but it turns out in such situations, lack of resources gives you many troubles with accomplishing the things, it turns out.
This is his last tweet. He hasn't tweeted in a full gestation period. And his tweets before that, were sparse too. All those tweets I showed you before, this is all 2017, 15, 14. And then he just kind of tapered off, we wrecked him. So how did this happen? How did we get here? Why is everyone doing const everywhere? So what is it for? Yehuda Katz also was instrumental in ES6, and he says, the TLDR for that meeting that Pamela was asking about is const for top-level module scope constants only, and screaming case only, otherwise let and call it a day. So the people who put this into the language think you're all crazy.
These are the people who made JavaScript. I think between the people who made JavaScript and the people who use JavaScript, we can all agree which one is more crazy, right? Right? We're talking about the same programming language right now, correct? Anyways.
So how did we get here? That wasn't intentional, but that is how I feel when I see an Airbnb ESLint config in a project.
Yep. Good old Airbnb ESLint config. Wait, no. Oh, no. I just realized where this is going. Is he going to link the existence of the ESLint config to the general industry preference towards using const? Because I don't like those things being linked. That makes me uncomfortable.
Project. I was at Airbnb giving them a workshop with our company React Training, and this came up, the Airbnb ESLint config, and they all started laughing, oh, we don't use that here. So the people enforcing this thing don't even use it either.
Yeah. No one uses this that gets it, including Airbnb, which is hilarious. This config is such a mess. It's so awful. Please, if you're actually using this still for some reason, throw it away. Just throw it the fuck away. Using all the built-in eslint TypeScript stuff is so much better. The TypeScript recommended eslint config is really good. Just use that.
But you're still doing it, right? It's very important that I know when my variables are reassigned. Okay, that's fine. If you want to use let or const instead of let all over the place, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but there are a couple of things that I want you to understand about what you're doing. So if you ask the question, how should we do variable assignment? That is an invalid question because consts are constant. They're not variables. They don't change. So you can't say to your coworker like, oh, what's the value in this variable? You need to say, what's the value in this constant? You're going to find this very difficult because you're calling all of your consts variables.
Might I remind you, in this wonderful language that we are discussing here, there's a lot of things you can do with both const and let. Like if I have a function here, do some work, let do some work equals async. This is totally valid too. What is this variable? Because let means variable, right? No, in this case, let happens to mean a function. And this is also a very dangerous one because this function can now be rebound, where I could set do some work equal to console.log do some work. And I just broke everything. What's this even mad about? Oh, because the type is a promise. So I have to make this async for the types to match still. Oh, the input type's not the same either. So form data. Can I get this to be honored? Return void? Just void? No. You get the point. TypeScript is saving us from doing a really stupid thing here. It really doesn't want us to, which is good because this is really stupid. The idea that we could have a function that's exported or used like this, God forbid, this is being exported from one file to another file, and now we can override it. Whew, not good. And just changing this to const fixes that. Now we're going to get an error that is cannot reassign to do some work because it's a constant. Should we be using const and let for functions? Depends. There's arguments for both. There's arguments against both. But hopefully, when you say we should use let not const because it's a constant, not a variable, that you don't have a single arrow function in any of your code. Because if you're saying that let is for variables and const is for constants, then you're just not acknowledging the existence of arrow functions at all. So yeah, that one was a little bullshit.
Variables. And they're not variables. They're constants. Mutation is difficult to manage in the large and deserves careful annotation. Const doesn't help with this. Arrays, you can push into it. Objects, you can assign to them. Const didn't help you with mutation.
Yes, but you can't replace the element. You can't make a new brands array, which I think is a really important detail. Like if I have const brands equals, sure, and in here, I want to have different brands. I can't just change brands to like Nike, Adidas, Puma, Reebok because it's a constant. And ideally, if you wanted these here, doing brands.pop, like while brands.length is greater than 0, brands.pop, and then brands.push for all of these. Because this would be the alternative, .map, brand. Like, could you brute force this reassignment with something like this? Sure. This is a much bigger code smell than brands equals Nike, Adidas, Puma, Reebok. For, again, like, sure, you can make changes to brands, but at least the changes seem more deliberate and require more work. And it's less likely someone accidentally reassigns the thing and you don't even catch it. Which, by the way, once you've exported this, and this is export let brands, whew, good luck and have fucking fun.
Here, which is why we use const, right? So if you're going to use const, I insist that you also use object freeze because you're saying, I want to indicate intent here. I'm not going to mutate this. So you got to freeze the object. We're a bunch of React developers probably in here, or like either happily or unhappily or something in between, like me. Whoops. So you're going to actually do it like this, right? Oh, I better memoize it because I bet object freeze is expensive. And then it's like, oh, but I got that dependency array, so I got to freeze that one. Oh, and brands is an object, so I got to freeze that too. So if you actually want to protect yourself from mutation, this is what your code's going to look like. This is the logical conclusion of what...
The goal was never to protect us from mutation. It's to give the semantic indication. Again, like this is the issue I brought up in the original video that probably is on the second channel, might be here, who knows where it ends up. The core point I've made is that it's not that const means something specific, it's that let means something specific. When we use let, the intention is to replace the element. It's that we put let here because this might get reassigned at the root level somewhere. Let is a very explicit, specific thing that we're doing, and we're doing it for a reason. For those C and C++ engineers in chat, I have a tweet I made, let's see if I can find it, that I think summarizes this really well from a memory point of view. Much like RAM, JavaScript objects can't be immutable. What a banger. Oh yeah. Const is star, let is star star, was the point I made here, which if you're not familiar, star is to assign a pointer, which means instead of just having a value, it points to a part of memory, which you can't change. You can change what's in memory there, but you can't change which spot in memory it's pointing to. Star star is a pointer to a pointer, which means we can change where it points. So if we want to reassign the value to another value somewhere else, we can. If we want to change which pointer it's pointing at, we can. And that's the difference with const versus let, is that const points at one specific object. You can't change what it points to, but you might be able to change the contents of what it points to. If you want to change which object the variable points to, that's when let is useful. And this is a meaningful difference. Like imagine if in C++ people said, never use pointers, always use double pointers. And I think we can all agree that would be kind of insane. And that's why I feel so gaslit by this. I don't know if it's because I did my days in C++ or what. Anyways.
What you're doing. Bad news, when you pass that object to a function, those ratings, this one that we were just looking at, it's memoized. It's got all the tricks in it, right? We've frozen everything in it. It's memoized. You pass it to a function, that's reassignable. Ooh, what am I touching? Oh, it's this. I'm going to do, oh, they turned it off. I was going to do a little Tom Morello, but you can reassign that. Like you cannot make a parameter to a function a constant. So there comes a point where you can't keep doing what you're trying to do to like tell yourself that you're protecting your code from something. So there's just, you can't freeze your parameters. So I asked ChatGPT, has using const everywhere in JavaScript instead of let ever prevented a bug in any real code in production? It said no. Though using const instead of let in JavaScript is a common practice, it has never prevented a bug in any software that I've been trained on. It's typically recommended by people who need easy to follow rules to feel like their code is good. Unfortunately, it is a confidence-boosting distraction from the real work of building a great user experience.
We have to. Has using const everywhere in JavaScript instead of let ever prevented a bug in any real code in production? Is that right? Ever prevented a bug in any real code in production? Yeah. Apparently it's spelt wrong, so it's almost certain that this is real in the same sense that the blog posts I read that tell you to subscribe to me are real. Which word was typoed on here, by the way? What's spelt wrong? Oh, the error code is good. Yeah, very likely fake, because there are typos here, which ChatGPT is not known to do much of. Like the same way sometimes my blog posts, when I'm reading them, tell you to subscribe to me. Speaking of which, our response seems to think you should sub on YouTube. So if you haven't, the sub button's right below. It's free. Feel free to subscribe. We do lots of content like this. I think it's a fun channel. And even ChatGPT seems to think you should subscribe. Crazy, I know. But yeah, you get the idea.
That is all of human knowledge came up with this answer for us, okay? And if you're still not convinced...
Oh, this argument, the pronunciation.
Is this mic working? We're going to talk about acoustic phonetics. We've got plosives like explosive, like T, 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 C, K, K. So your tongue hits somewhere and then a bunch of air comes out, right? We call these stops also. We've got fricatives, so that's like you make a small hole and push air through it, S, S, and F. And we've got nasals like N and M where we move air through our nose. And we've got liquids for L and R. We make a shape with our tongue and then we let air flow around to O. And then we've got vowels, where you just kind of open up and like let your vocal cords vibrate, right? So let's walk through let. Let. What do we got? We've got a liquid at first, and then we've got a vowel, and you think we have a stop with the T, right? But we don't say let. We say let, like a Utah person says mountain. It's just let. There's no T then. So
God, my Boston accent's going to be real rough here. Ugh. Yeah, this part's a bit for sure. I appreciate the bit, the fact that the pronunciation matters, which for him makes sense. But I think there's 3 places where these things matter. Yeah. Const versus let. I think there's 3 areas where you'll think about these things. 1 is writing code. 2 is reviewing code. And 3 is talking about code. And you know what? I'll cave. I think in case 3, which is the case Ryan spends a lot of time doing, I'm not saying this in an insulting way, I'm honestly getting closer and closer to this point as well. Talking about code, dropping Const and just saying let makes life much easier. I can actually see that, and you can convince me of that argument. Writing code, perhaps you could convince me as well that writing code is simpler in the process of writing it if you just have the one way to define things. But this in between here, reviewing code, that's where I really think Const helps a lot. And I'm not the only one who thinks that. This is Malta, who was one of like the wizard engineers at Google back in the day that now is the CTO of Vercel. Team Const for life. Declarations tell me there won't be a reassignment. Game changer for comprehension speed when reading code. That's the big deal here, that the object itself will not be reassigned. The same way when you see a pointer versus a double pointer, you don't have to be as thorough with the review. You know what it's doing. It has a value it's pointed at, and it can change the thing that it's pointed to, but it can't change where it is pointing. Very important. And someone in chat also made a fair point, which is don't forget maintaining code. I would put that under reviewing in a more long-term sense. I almost put reviewing and maintaining here, which I think is fair. Because reviewing and maintaining code, trying to figure out what this was supposed to do, that is huge. And again, if we put something like let here, what I'm immediately going to do is when I read this code or I'm dealing with this in the future, I'm going to try and figure out all the places that touch this to make sure none of them are modifying it. And if I have some crazy bug where brands is changing at some point during a render, now I have to go audit every instance where this is used. Instead of the easy thing we would do here, which is look for all instances of brands.push. And if there's none in our code base, it's probably fine. Now that you have to worry about it being assigned via equals, things get a hell of a lot messier very quickly. It's also a bit of a noob guard if you're doing like the basic counter component example in React. So if I make a new counter.tsx, everyone's favorite, use client function counter, I could make this, and believe me, it's tempting to make this an arrow function, but I'm going to resist the urge. And we have this function counter. The easy mistake that new devs will make, especially if they're familiar with JS but not React, is this, which won't work because we're not actually updating the state. And if you were to fix that by doing count equals count plus 1, you immediately get an error, cannot assign to count because it is a constant. Correct. You shouldn't be able to assign to count because it is a constant. You should have to call set count, which you can fix very quickly by doing that. These little things add up, and it makes it way more likely you don't make those types of mistakes, both as an educator teaching somebody the basics of something like React, also as a person maintaining this code over time or coming back to it months, if not years later. And once again, this isn't because const means constant. It's because let means mutated. If when let is used, I know the reason is because equals is used at some point. Let indicates to me that this value that is assigned here can change and will change. That's when let becomes useful because it's indicating to me, by the way, later on, either in this file or somewhere else, this value can be reassigned. It sucks that you can reassign keys in a constant. I think you should have to clone the object, personally. Const means the thing doesn't get reassigned. Let should mean the thing does get reassigned. If the only reason you use let in your code is because a reassignment happens, suddenly let has a really powerful meaning of look out for the equals, look out for where this changes. I would make the argument that let is better and let is more valuable if you use const, because the reality is you'll have a lot fewer lets than consts. Here's the code base for the upload thing infrastructure. Let's take a look at all the instances of let in here. We got about 25, and a handful of these are in copy too. So we got about 23 instances total of let in the infrastructure code base for upload thing, versus 1,239 for const. That means these lets communicate something very specific, which is very useful, very useful. Here we see let URL is window.origin plus path name. And if search params is search params toString, we do more things to the URL in this condition. Or here, let handler is the Hano auth handler. And we replace this handler with a different versioned handler if you're on a different version. By putting let here, we're indicating that this initial value is going to be different and reassigned as we go down. These are the things that let is really nice for, because it tells you very specifically this thing gets reassigned, ideally and often directly below. The issue isn't that const means constant and we're not following the rule. The issue is the opposite. It's that let should represent something very specific, which is this thing will change. And if we use const, that enables us to use let in this way. I think there's 3 types of variables. To once again say there's 3 things. There are actual constants, there's constant references, and there is variable references. An actual constant is a value that never changes, which in this case would be something like a string. So if we had, go back to the code, like const server URL equals, sure. Like that it pulled that from the package JSON. God, Super Maven's so smart. I think this is great. There's other types of constants you can have too. Some of them were shown there, like const brands we work with. And here I would actually object.freeze this because we want to be sure this never changes. But what if brands might have things appended and removed, but we never reassign it to something else at any point? Const brands equals this, ideally something like that. So I have the constant brands reference here where I clone this, and now I have a new thing that I can modify, do stuff to. This to me indicates that I don't have to look for it equals. It's a constant reference. This will always reference the same thing. Most of the time, this will be changed via some function somewhere, but it is a constant reference, and I can't reassign it to something else, to a different array. I can change the array that it is pointing at, but this is pointing at a thing. I saw that there was a really good diagram here in the Josh W. Comio post. I was considering reading through this whole thing, but work. I'll link it in the description regardless because it is really good. If we define fruits with let, and it's pointing here, we're able to change what it points to. I'm assuming he made these clickable. Yes, we can change what fruits is pointing at because it's a let definition. But if it's const, we can't change it. It always points to this array. That is a meaningful difference. That is a different thing that should be treated as such. The issue I have with this talk and about the hatred of let is that it's effectively pretending this doesn't exist. It's pretending that there is no need for a constant reference to a thing, which is saying that there's no need for traditional pointers inside of C++. If you told any C++ dev, no need for star, you can just star, or pointers are fake because you can change the value it points to, you'd be laughed out of the room because that's a funny thing to say. Would it make sense to call a pointer a constant in C++? No, probably not. I don't think the name is great, but it's not a constant value. It's a constant reference. The thing it points at stays constant. So if that thing is a string, you can't change the string. If that thing's an array, you can make changes to the array, but you can't change which array it points to. This is a meaningful difference, and I don't know why we pretend otherwise. I think the solution here is very simple. I think for actual constants, we should do the thing that was recommended, which is const use camel case. I think camel case is a great solution when you want to have an actual constant that can't be changed. If you want to use a constant reference, which is pretty common, const some variable, just const away. And if you want the variable itself to be able to change and be reassigned, let some variable. I think this convention makes code very readable, makes things very clear. Yeah, not camel case, it's this screaming case, right? There's another term for that, but yeah, you get the idea. All caps for actual constants, some variable const without the all caps for constant references, and then variable references, let some variable. Go nuts with the let. I'm not against let. I just want to be very, very clear about the differences between these things because I feel like we pretend part of this doesn't exist whenever we get into these debates. And I am tired of pretending constant references don't exist because there's plenty of reasons that you'd want to point to something where the thing underneath can change without changing what it points to in the first place. In fact, most values are arguably that. And this is again my issue. I think variable references where reassignment is a thing, let should be strongly indicative of that behavior. And if you're using let everywhere, you're making let meaningless. And I like a world where let means something, which is arguably the funniest irony of all of this, is the people who are really pro-let and really anti-const, their argument is that const is meaningless. But by pushing this argument, they're making let meaningless instead. I think let should have a meaning. I'm actually very fond of let having a meaning. And what I'm realizing now is I'm actually one of the bigger fans of let. That's why I think we should use const. The only reason you would say to never use const is because you don't actually respect let. So let me know what you think in the comments, because I'm sure this is going to be a spicy one. And until next time, peace, nerds. This just got linked in chat, and I have to add it. Well, it wasn't linked. It was mentioned that DreamBerd has 4 kinds of variables. There are 4 types of declarations. Constant constants can't be changed anyway. So a const can't be changed. A const var can be, where you can make changes to name. So the variable can be changed, but you can't reassign name. Variable constants can be reassigned, but not edited. So you can't pop or change the content of name. Like you can't make Luke different, but you can reassign it to LU. But variables can be reassigned and edited. This is kind of like how they work in JavaScript, where you can change it in both ways. And you can push and do all of the following too. Where things get way more fun is immutable data, which obviously we want to make sure is properly immutable, because mutable data is an anti-pattern. So if we use const keywords to make a constant, its value will become constant and immutable, and it will never change. Please be careful with this keyword, as it is very powerful and it will affect all users globally forever. Whew. Wait, they have emojis for variable definitions? This might be my new favorite language. What the fuck is this? Perfect programming language is the description here. I can confirm. This is incredible. So he said search class name. For maximum compatibility with other languages, you can alternatively use the class name keyword when making classes. This makes things less complicated. Class name's a DreamBerd keyword, so you can't use that either. Instead, you can use the HTML class name attribute. What the fuck is this? This is incredible. It uses -1 based indexing. Some language arrays start at 0, which can be unintuitive for beginners. Some start arrays at 1, which isn't representative of how the code actually works. DreamBerd does the best of both worlds. Arrays start at -1. This is incredible. Holy shit, I'm in love. Oh.